All right, welcome to this explainer. Let's just jump right in, shall we? Today, we're unpacking the absolute dominance of German football, and we're zeroing in on the sheer empire that is Bayern Munich. Have you ever watched a team and wondered how they don't just win, but completely suffocate the competition? Well, we aren't just going to look at what happens on the grass for 90 minutes. Oh no, we're looking at the massive, interconnected machine behind it all. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The tactical masterclass. 2. Financial invincibility. 3. Power to the fans. 4. More than a game. And 5. The ultimate football ecosystem. Starting things off with part 1, the tactical masterclass, focusing on Jupp Heynckes' historic 2012 to 2013 treble. To really grasp the scale of this empire, we have to rewind to that legendary season. This was the year Bayern Munich became the first German side ever to win the treble. And it all starts with one mind-blowing number, 91. That was the highest point tally ever recorded in the league. They didn't just win the title, they fundamentally broke the math of the competition. But wait, it actually gets wilder. 25. That was the massive 25-point gap between first and second place. Just let that sink in for a second. In professional sports, the margins are supposed to be razor thin, right? This wasn't a competition. It was a total, relentless suffocation of the entire league. And the absolute nail in the coffin? 29. They won the league with a record-breaking 29 wins, meaning they were numerically crowned champions in just 28 match days. By the time spring rolled around, everyone else in the country was basically playing friendlies. But, how did they actually pull that off? Well, it came down to a brilliant tactical innovation. Enter the concept of zonal shielding. Heynckes took a fluid 4-2-3-1 formation and layered on this aggressive counterpress. The whole idea was simple but devastating. Make the pitch as huge as possible when attacking and as tiny as possible when defending. When Bayern lost the ball, the fullbacks wouldn't just drop back into a defensive block, they'd push forward. Striker Mario Mandzukic would make an angled run, literally forcing the opponent's goalkeeper to play the ball out wide. And once the ball went to the flanks, boom. The entire Bayern shape tilted, shielding the center of the pitch and trapping the opposition like a net. But here's the catch. For the whole team to push up and trap the opponent like that, you can't have a goalkeeper just glued to his goal line. You need a sweeper keeper. Manuel Neuer completely redefined this role. He'd push high up behind the backline, sweep up loose balls, and actively recycle possession. Because Neuer acted almost like an extra center back, defenders like Dante and Jerome Boateng could push incredibly high up the pitch. It was a massive shift in football tactics across the board, and it made Bayern a total nightmare to play against. So the takeaway here is pretty clear. Tactical genius is wonderful, but it requires world-class players who are smart enough to execute it seamlessly. And world-class players, well, they require world-class bank accounts. Which brings us from the pitch straight into the boardroom. Which brings us to part 2, financial invincibility, and the Allianz Arena feat. How on earth did Bayern build the corporate machinery to fund all of this? It actually starts with the very ground they play on. Take a listen to what Bayern chairman Karl-Heinz Rummenigge proudly announced. Back in 2005, Bayern borrowed €346 million on a 25-year plan to build the beautiful Allianz Arena. Instead of dragging that out, they paid it completely off in just 9.5 years.
Completely by private means. That is 16 years early.
And that early payoff, it absolutely catapulted their financial power. Look at the revenue growth. They went from a turnover of around €432 million to breaking the magic $500 million mark in the 2013 to 2014 season. Why is that such a big deal? Because every single euro generated by that newly paid-off stadium could now be instantly reinvested into the team's quality. Activating a €25 million release clause for a star player like Marco Reus, suddenly that's just a drop in the bucket. All right, let's move to part 3, power to the fans, and the famous 50+1 rule. Usually when we start talking about €500 million revenues, we're talking about mega corporations treating sports clubs like their own private playthings. But not in Germany. This brings us to the absolute cornerstone of their football, the 50+1 rule. It's a unique legal framework mandating that a club's fans must retain at least 51% of the voting rights. It explicitly prevents your standard corporate takeovers and keeps these clubs securely tethered to their local communities. Let's contrast this with the rest of the world so you can see why the Bundesliga is so culturally unique. In the standard global sports ownership model, the external investor model, the whole focus is usually profit-driven, controlled by massive corporations or super wealthy individuals. But Germany? They use a fan-centric, member-led model. The ultimate priority is community influence. In fact, Germany's independent competition regulator, the Bundeskartellamt, backed this rule up. They stated that while, it might restrict corporate investment, it legitimately preserves the participatory and member-led nature of German football. Now, to be completely thorough, I should mention there are a few highly debated exceptions to this strict rule. Clubs like Bayer Leverkusen and VfL Wolfsburg are exempt because they were originally founded by and have over a 20-year long-standing connection with the corporations Bayer and Volkswagen. Then you've got clubs like RB Leipzig and TSG Hoffenheim, which essentially exist outside the standard rule due to massive external investments or wealthy benefactors. As you can imagine, this creates a pretty intense, ongoing debate in Germany about how to balance financial growth with traditional fan influence. Moving into part 4, more than a game, looking at corporate social responsibility. Because the vast majority of these clubs are legally tied to their local communities, their day-to-day priorities look very different. A modern German football club is basically a complex symbiosis. It's not just about turning a profit for some distant shareholders. The club constantly has to balance the competing needs of its fans, local politicians, sponsors, employees, and even the environment. When a club's members literally vote on how it operates, it simply has to generate value for the public, not just the boardroom. So, what's actually driving German clubs to act as these socially responsible, eco-friendly hubs? It breaks down into 3 distinct drivers. First, societal. Clubs deeply want to strengthen their regional identity and act as role models. Second, economic. Engaging kids in the community early on builds lifelong fan loyalty, which naturally attracts socially conscious sponsors. And third, political. There's immense pressure from government eco-policies, plus the league itself, the DFL, recently made sustainability guidelines a mandatory part of club licensing. Bringing it all to part 5, the ultimate football ecosystem. Let's put this whole puzzle together. Let's take a step back. How does a tactical scheme, a paid-off stadium, and fan voting rates all connect? It's a beautifully engineered cycle. Step 1. Because the fans own the club, the focus on local social responsibility builds immense generational loyalty. Step 2. That rabid fan loyalty creates a packed stadium and incredible, sustainable revenue, allowing them to clear massive debts decades early. Step 3. With 0 debt and $500 million in revenue, they have the total financial freedom to hire the best minds and execute devastating systems like the zonal shield. So a goal scored on the pitch is quite literally the endpoint of a massively complex, fan-tethered ecosystem. Which leaves us with one incredibly provocative question to wrap up this explainer. As the rest of the global sporting world becomes increasingly dominated by private equity and bottomless billionaire funds, can this highly regulated, localized, community-first football model actually survive? Well, if Bayern Munich's empire is any indication, never bet against the power of the pitch, the pocketbook, and the people working as one. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and keep learning.